and the church itself struggling to pivot. That was a really popular term at the time, struggling to pivot to face a new normal and kind of thinking about, well, what is this new normal? Now, I've been around for long enough to know that intense seasons come and go in life and in leadership. But this stuff was coming from every angle: spiritual, emotional, physical, mental, material, financial. You couldn't have written it, except, of course, I did. Yeah, so 2022 was catalytic. It was suddenly as if all the stuff I'd been thinking about for years, writing about, talking about for years, suddenly began to come together in a whole new way. And I understood in a new way that God had been preparing me all my life, all my ministry, to say something very specific. And Metamorph was me walking in obedience and actually saying it or writing it.
So Natalie, we're going to come to you. Like, what was it about this book that's really connected with you, and why?
Yeah, I think I've been involved in some of the work that's been going on over the last 18 months around some of the abuse scandals in the church. And I spend a lot of time ranting and raging about the horror of a lot of the power misuse that's taken place, not just by those who've perpetrated harm, but by the many people around those perpetrators who've colluded with, supported, and that there's a lot of kind of codependencies on power that are really harmful. And so I have spent a lot of time pointing out all the awfulness, and it's incredibly wonderful to have a book that's like, this is where the solutions are.
This is what we can do.
This is because I was in a meeting actually while I was reading before the book came out, a meeting with somebody who was I was talking about, like, what do we need to do about this, and I was like, there's a book coming out that will really help. And I think so much of what the book talks about is that sense of it being about each of us doing the work, and it being kind of fundamentally much deeper work than has been required, and really challenging that kind of sense of status and the status quo of those holding power being kind of held to a much lesser account than everybody else, and saying, actually, that can't happen anymore. And I think a quote that I really loved was where it says, God's promise is not about being in charge, but about being change agents and having power in, with, and for. And that sense of like a complete like paradigm shift on power and leadership and who has it and what we do about it. Because, and there are really, really serious consequences. I think what Isha was saying was so important about, this is about eternity starts when we're born, right? And that sense that there are people who are being deeply, deeply harmed, and who are being deeply, deeply harmful too. And so this has really serious consequences for all of us to ensure that the church particularly becomes a much safer place, and that's by each of us doing that work. And so for me, that was the core of the book, was this relief of like, hopefully someone's saying what we should do, because I'm really good at saying what's wrong, but it's great that Kate's telling us what to do with that. So thanks.
Amazing. Because my follow-up question was going to be, but I think you've already answered it, like, what key questions does it raise for your context, and how do you think it could positively impact your sphere? But it seems from what you're saying, Natalie, that actually this is bringing some of the how to respond to perhaps some of the not so great examples that we've seen and experienced. So thank you so much for sharing.